Hi there, I'm Clifford Bates, and welcome once again to Reading Aristotle's Politics. Today we're looking at Chapter 6 of Book 7, which deals with the sea, right? The city, Chapter 5 before it dealt with the question of territory, the size of the territory, that of the people. Now this is the question of the access to the sea, some discussion about the sea, right? So therefore, this is the question of Chapter 6, the sea, concerning access to the sea. There is much dispute as to whether it's beneficial or harmful for well-governed cities. In other words, this is the question: is having being near the sea good or bad? Okay. For some assert to let in a certain foreigners who have been raised under other laws is disadvantageous to respect of good governance, as is overpopulation, as a result of the use of the sea for exporting and importing. A multitude of traders come into existence, and this is contrary to their engaging in politics in a beautiful manner. In other words, once you have a sea, you have the sea, right? You have trade, you have commerce. People can come in, strangers, and then you have commerce, you have trade, you have sea. You get foreigners and people migrate into it. You get people who come there, and they what? They more and more people, strangers, and this becomes disadvantageous because you bring foreigners in, people with different laws and different customs, not used to doing it this way, and this leads to the problem of disadvantage for good government, he says. And this is contrary to their exercising politics in a beautiful manner, right? This is 26. The reading of hyponarium in the manuscript rather than hypotarium as a manuscript in does. Editors, and the other, I take empoia pathos as the subject of this clause rather than the telepoem, as commonly is done. So if hypotimer is retained, the meaning would be this. This is the alternative, which arise as a result of the multitude of traders using the sea for exporting and importing, which is contrary to their being fine and good. That's the other. In other words, you can interpret it this two way. This is the one way you can understand it. This, if you understand it by taking the text of the clause and the other manner by the thing, it says which arises this problem as a result of the multitude of traders using the sea for exporting and importing, which is contrary to their being finely governed. But if you take what he says here, a multitude of traders come into existence, and this is contrary to their engaging in politics in a fine manner. There was the use of the sea for importing, and then what? It's the multitude of traders come into existence, and the excessive traders is contrary to this. Right now, it is now it is not unclear that if these things do not result, it is better, both with a view to safety and with a view of having a ready supply of necessary things, for the city and the territory to be close to the sea. So therefore, it's not clear whether it's good or is it beneficial or not. Maybe the danger is being the sea. You have the problem of too much trade, too much commerce, and too many foreigners coming into the place, and that makes it the city being not so well governed. Not well governed. Good governance becomes more difficult. But then what happens is that maybe you don't have enough by not being too far away from the sea. You don't have necessary resources and necessary things that you need for the city to be self-sufficient, right? So it's not unclear that if these things do not result, right, those things do, it is better both with a view of safety and a view of having ready supply of necessary things for the city and the territory to be close to the sea. In other words, being close to the sea allows you food, allows you access, allows you to get access to resources that those who are not near sea don't have. So it is better in regards to resources and access, but it is, and also for defense too. But the danger here is that too much commerce, and too many people coming in, right? With a view of bearing up under enemies more easily, they should be capable of ready defense in both elements, land and sea, if they are to preserve themselves. In other words, you should be able to defend yourself both in terms of land and sea, with a view to injuring the attackers. If this is not possible in both elements, to do so in one will be easier for those who have access to both. So if you're not able to harm both, in other words, you have to be able to defend yourself in both, but to injure attackers, if it's not possible to do both sea and land, to do so in one will be still easier for those who have access to both. In other words, it's going to be easier to have a land army if you have access to sea. You have resources and import things. And likewise, if you have access to the sea, you can have a naval force. It is also necessary for cities to both to import the thing that happens not to be available at home and to export things that are in surplus. So in other words, it's going to be necessity for to get things you don't have and they're not available you to. And then things that you have excess of, you want to be able to export it, right? Trade. But the city should not be involved for trade for itself. In other words, the trade should not be just for trade's sake. It should be, in other words, not for trade for itself, not for others, but who set themselves up as a market for all to, in other words, not for others. The city should be involved in trade for itself. In other words, sorry, it should be doing it not for others, right? It should be the city should be doing the trade for its benefit, not for the benefit of others. Okay, not for others. Those who set themselves up as a market for all do so for the sake of revenue. Therefore, they should be getting revenue if they're going to do market for everyone. A city that should not be a party, a city that should not be a party to this sort of aggrandizement, should not possess a trading center of the sort. If you don't want to, if you're not going to be a party to this kind of growth in commerce and this things, and it doesn't benefit you, then it's not a good idea to have a trading port like that. You should only, in other words, the purpose of the trading should be what for your benefit, and if you're going to have a port like that, the revenues you should get should be able to make your help benefit your city. And if city is not benefiting from those revenues from being a trade thing for all, then it makes no sense having such a thing, right? Of this sort. Since we see at present many territories and cities having ports and harbors that are naturally well positioned in relation to the city, so that they neither form a part of the same town nor are overly far away, but are dominated by walls and other fortifications of the sort. It is evident that any good thing. It is evident that if any good thing results from such access, this will be available to the city, while having anything harmful can be guarded against easily by the means of laws that stipulate and define which sort of person should be not able to have dealings with one another. So therefore, you can do this by law. Who can participate? Who cannot participate? Now, there's a note here of this sort, fortifications of this sort. This example. This is the Piraeus, right? The port of Athens stood some 5 miles from the city. It was connected by long walls, and its harbors were fortified with against the seas. Megria, Corinth, and other cities with important maritime interests had similar arrangements. The idea of this, and that. So therefore, this idea against which in other words, not only can you have the city like this, but you can have rules. Whether if you benefit from this connection to the harbor, but if you think there's dangers, then you have to have law. Law needs to be done to stipulate who can be doing business, what sort of person should and which should not have dealings with one another. Concerning naval power, it is not unclear that it is best to have a certain amount of it. In other words, Navy power is not necessary. It is not unclear that it is best to have a certain amount of it. They should be formidable and capable of putting up a defense by sea as well as by land, not only for themselves but also for certain of their neighbors. Okay, so therefore you need to have. He says that it's unclear that it is best to have a certain amount of it, enough to defense, but also to defend your neighbors. Right. Concerning the extent and size of this force, one must always look to the way of life of the city. Okay. In other words, if the city is these kind of forces, if the city is by a commercial city, then again that's the story about Athens, right? The laborers became the orators that they gave the naval victory. If the farmers are going to be more land. Pardon. You have farmers are going to be more infantry. There's going to be land armies. If it's going to be workers and laborers, okay, these can be sailors. These can be the people who do this. If there's lots of commerce and there's lots of sea, you get a lot of resources. Again, this is the question of this. It depends on It depends on the way of life, right? The question of the way of life of the city. If it's going to have a way of life that involves leadership and is political, a cities that are going to be of leadership, hegemony, and is political, it must necessarily have sort of power, this sort of power available, as well as to match its actions. In other words, if it's going to be a head leader of other cities, it needs both land power and sea power. It needs the sea. It'll need to be able to make things. So therefore, but if it's not going to be a leader, he's going to be just. If it's not going to be a leader, it's going to be just a free city that doesn't want to get involved, doesn't want leadership, and it's political only internally. It doesn't really want to evolve in the politics of others. Then you don't necessarily need a big navy in that sense. You need a navy only to the degree that you to protect your coastline and just maybe to ensure that your neighbors don't fall collapse. Right. Um, Cities will not necessarily have the overpopulation that occurs in connection with the seafaring masses. These should be no part of the city. In other words, these large seafaring masses. The cities will not necessarily have the overpopulation that occurs in connections with seafaring masses. These should have no part in this idea of these people that. Remember, Athens' greatness was attended to the seafaring masses, and how they dominated the working class, the sailors, and Athens. And that led to the radical democracy, right? This is something he doesn't want to happen. He doesn't want to have overpopulation. And seafaring masses tend to be. The maritime element, and now this is why 28 is what is heavily on the Marines, right? This heavily armed troops embarked on ships, right? The marine element is free and belongs to the infantry. This is the authority and this is an authority and dominates the crew. So therefore, the marine element, the navalized, the warriors, the armed elements on the ships, these should be the authoritative and dominate the crew. If there are available a multitude of subjects who farm the territory, in other words, the people who farm on the territories, uh, uh, um, um, there will necessarily be abundance of sailors too. So there's servants, people. Now this is subjects. Subjects. Now 29. This is the big thing. The terms here is serf, agriculture. That is agricultural serfs, right? The servants, deloy. This is slaves, maybe even, or agricultural serfs, right? Of Sparta, Tesla. If there's, in other words, you have serfs who can do this. In other words, if there's enough serfs, not citizens, not the farm. Remember, the farmers are not going to be. This is going to be something he's going to talk about. These are going to be agricultural serfs, okay, slaves, okay, deloy. That's why the word deloy I think is here, right? Who farm the territory. There will necessarily be abundance of sailors too. In other words, the sailor is going to be. We see this. We see this too in certain cities at present. For example, the city of the Helicratos, which sends out as many ships in spite of there being a modest size of a more modest size than other cities. Now, 30 is this argument is meant to answer the possible objection that the possession of naval power deriving from the experience of Athens, where the manpower requirement of the fleet had generally increased the political strength of the lower classes. Right. This is Book 4, Chapter 4, Sections 21, Book 5, Chapter 4. This is the danger here. This is an argument, counter argument. You can have it, but you have to have serfs. You have to have serfs. In other words, slaves, and those people do the serfs. Uh, okay, but that's going to be a problem. Having serfs is problematic, he says. Having serfs is a problem. That will be a problem. It's the helot. The helot problem is a problem for the Spartans, and this is something that is addressed in Book 2 of the Politics. Book 2, we talk about the Spartans. And that he will say, Aristotle will say, that not having the many or the multitude be part of the city, and particularly the farmers who are the multitude, this number, these people, excluding them from the city is not a wise thing in Book 3. Okay, so therefore this is another thing. So therefore, although this is a moderate, he says that the possibility that it can be done this way, but it's risky, right, doing these things. So concerning territory, harbors, cities, and the sea, and concerning naval power, let our discussion stand in this matter. So now that we end it. Next chapter, chapter 7, we'll talk about the political multitude. He'll talk about the political multitude, right? He'll talk more about the political multitude. He talked about he seems to want to avoid here that what happened in Athens. You don't want to see. You don't want too many people. You don't want a seafaring mass. You don't want these laborers. You don't want the excessive laborers, because with the seafaring mass, what will happen is that it will make it will push towards a more extreme democracy, make it more popular. It will make the regime more towards the popular regime. It will push pressures to make things more democratic and more urban democracy. So that is the danger of that. That's why he tries to give this idea. Oh yeah, we're going to use the farmers, the serfs. Going to be using the delos, the slaves who farm the land, like serfs. We're not citizens. We're not sharing the regime. But the servants are there. Um, this is how this chapter ends. So we end chapter 6 on this discussion. It wraps up the concerning of the territories, the harbors, the seas, the defensive qualities, naval power. This is enough. This ends our discussion of these things. So for now, here we end. If you have any comments, questions, or things, put them below on the sea power and sea there. When I see them, I'll give you. I'll respond to them, and say, you need some more things to be talking about. I'll say something to you. If you have any questions or concerns, put it below. If you liked it, like it, please. Share it with a friend, share it with a partner, put it on your social media. If you've subscribed, please, if you haven't subscribed, subscribe. If you have subscribed, encourage others to subscribe. Please, we need to grow chapters more. I need to get to that sweet number. If you have, if you didn't like it and had problems with it, please put the comments. So you can say thumbs down and be criticism. What can I do better? What did I do wrong? And how can I do things better? I can learn something, right? If you want to follow me on social media, the links are below. If you want to help me continue doing this, there's ways you can do it by Subscribestar, Patreon. Of course, yes, I'm not doing that much on it, but there's not many people there. So you should maybe do more. You should encourage more. Okay, if it's there, if there's a crowd of people there and that they want things, I'll do something. But if there's why, I'm not going to do things if there's no one there. So, people say, well, why don't you have it? I technically have what do you call those? A Discord server, but I don't use it really. It's just there. But so I had to do that for Twitter or something, or even Patreon or something. Yeah, I think I do that for Patreon and Subscribestar. I had to have a Discord server for some reason. That's one way. Another way you can help me is you can buy my book. This is my recent book, 2020. This is not a commentary, interpretation. This is a notebook, a notebook on Aristotle's politics. It's a workbook in that sense. This is a study. This is a student guide, kind of a workbook to help you go through the text. It's like a Cliff's Notes, right, where you get going through the politics book by book, chapter by chapter, with outlines, questions that are emerged, the thematic themes, highlight some issues to kind of give some backdrop to understand aspects and arguments, outlines, graphs, charts, and things to get a better grip of the text, book by book, chapter by chapter. It's available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all online places. But if you buy it by Lulu directly, I will get the profit that those bookstores get. So therefore, please do by Lulu. Yes, those places, I'll get some money still, but and they usually ship time. Sometimes they give free shipping. Lulu might not do that. Does not do that. So therefore, I understand why people might say, "Oh no, I'm going to buy by that because it's cheaper." But please, just get this one. Buy it. If you have not bought it already, buy it for a friend or a student that's going to be doing Aristotle's politics or going to school, studying the politics. This will be a very good, helpful, useful guide for anyone studying the politics. On that, we stop today. We'll turn next time we meet to chapter 7, which deals with the political multitude. On that note, we'll say goodbye for the day. Have a good day. Take care. Bye-bye.